Now, as the Prime Minister prepares to go to Rooty Hill in Western Sydney for a week and obviously go electioneering, not governing, the Prime Minister decided to give this interview to our ABC a little bit earlier today. Now, she didn't come up with the question, but the question and how she answered it is something that I thought we should take just a couple of moments to deal with here, because when all else fails, if you're a politician, blame the media. Start shooting the messenger. Well, thankfully, there was a person who's on side with the PM, and here's a question that was asked today on the ABC, and have a listen to her response.
Do you ever feel misunderstood?
Oh, yes.
When?
Oh, by the media cycle that you refer to. I mean, I think there is a lot in this time of change in the media industry that pushes the cycle towards, more schlock, more horror.
All right, schlock and horror. Well, here's 10 things off the top of my head that are why people have a problem with the Prime Minister. You can pick them in any particular order and feel free to add to this list if you want to. All of these are things that have come out of the Prime Minister's very own mouth. Remember, before she challenged Kevin Rudd, she was more chance of being full forward for the Bulldogs. Once she actually became Prime Minister, she said that a government had lost its way, particularly with a mining tax. So she asked the mining companies to put together a mining tax that has now seen, rather than the $2 billion, which has already been spent by this government, it's made less than $200 million. On the issue of asylum seekers, while I was one of the people who used to believe in onshore processing, that was wrong. It was a mistake, as was the mistake of Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard to back it for as long as they did. And under that time, hundreds of people haven't just arrived here in boats, but more importantly, hundreds of people have died trying to get here in boats. That is a failure of this government, of this Prime Minister. That's not schlock and horror, Prime Minister. That's something that has actually happened, and happened on your watch. Also worth having a look at here. What about the carbon tax? The very obvious promise. Before an election, we won't have one because of the Greens, a deal that never needed to be signed, by the way. They were always going to back you when it came to supply. We ended up with a carbon tax. I've got plenty more here. What about the budget surplus? The Prime Minister is the one who said for years and years and years, no ifs, no buts, this will happen. Well, as we know, it's not going to happen, and yet another major deficit and government debt will be being delivered by the world's best treasurer in May of this year. There's the Peter Slipper situation, the genius move to take a bloke with an incredible history of alleged rorting that is now before a court and put him into the Speaker's chair, and allow him to be paid $300,000 while being suspended as the Speaker. There's the endless defence of Craig Thomson. Remember, the full support for the member of Dobell? This might all be schlock and horror to you, Prime Minister, but this is stuff that has actually come out of your mouth, and your mouth alone. The Craig Thomson scenario and the incredible things that were happening there. I mentioned that again. And then there's the election date. The election date named by a Prime Minister who says, I want to set it so we can govern for 6 months and then we'll get into a campaign. So what's the Prime Minister doing next week? Will she be governing in Rooty Hill? Will the Prime Minister be governing there? Or is she doing her best to campaign in seats in Western Sydney? Campaigning to make sure that those seats don't turn and don't kick the government out. The truth is this, Prime Minister. These are all things that you have said. These are all things that you have done. And the media, well, it's our job to talk about them. It's our job to report them. It's not just our job to conveniently forget what you said 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago or 2 days ago. Because funnily enough, whether you like it or not, whether Tony Abbott likes it or not, we're not just your shareholders, we're your boss. And we remember what you said. Can you know what you think? Do you think the Prime Minister is misunderstood? Or like me? That's 10 things off the top of my head that are of the Prime Minister's own making. Now, I think off the top of my head that I promised 10 issues with the Prime Minister, and I think I came up with 9. Just in case, or if I came up with 10, here's the 11th. Remember the sexism debate, the misogyny debate, the debate where the Prime Minister was going to call it out wherever she saw it, but could only ever seem to see it when it came to Tony Abbott and Liberals, not people in our own side of politics? There you go. There's your round 10 or 10 plus 1. You take your pick.